The Malthari observation spire hummed with quiet energy, its crystalline towers catching the last violet light of their dying sun. Commander Malvar stood at the panoramic viewport, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back, watching the distant flicker of human ships patrolling the edge of their system. They were so small compared to the flowing organic majesty of Malthari architecture. Blocky, angular things, bristling with crude kinetic weapons and primitive fusion drives. For decades, the Malthari had watched. They had seen humanity claw its way out of its cradle world, its wars bloody and chaotic, its politics fractious. They had noted the crude first steps into space, chemical rockets, then fission, then fusion, always so loud, so wasteful. The Malthari had long since perfected silent ion drives, their vessels gliding through the void on streams of purple, white energy, their hulls woven from aerogel and self-repairing crystalline alloys. Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, a reflexive gesture of unease. The humans should have been irrelevant, a young, reckless species, barely past their industrial age. But then the first human warship had entered Malthari's sensor range, indomitable. They called it, a name that carried weight, even in translation. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was a monster. Malvar's neural interface pulsed as the spire's diagnostics fed him the latest scans. The human vessel's armor was layered in ways Malthari science had never considered. Ablative plating, reactive nanoweave, something they called shear dispersion gel. Their weapons were worse. Railguns that fired tungsten rods at speeds that warped space, time around the projectile. Plasma lances that didn't just burn, they unmade molecular bonds. And then there were the Marines. Malvar had seen the footage from the last engagement. Human soldiers in powered armor, their movements too fast, too precise. They didn't fight like warriors, they fought like machines, worse, like predators. A soft chime echoed through the spire. Thalolan, his chief scientist, approached. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed in deference. "Commander," she murmured, her voice a whisper of ionized air. "The last of our allies have withdrawn. The Cathari Dominion has formally severed all treaties." Malvar didn't turn. He already knew. The Cathari, the Veln, even the Cathari Collective, all had abandoned them. The Malthari were alone, and the enemy was coming. Thalolan hesitated, then spoke again. "There is one option left." Malvar exhaled, his breath stirring the faint mist of atmospheric condensers. The humans. A gamble. A desperate, foolish gamble. The humans were unpredictable, violent. They had no understanding of the delicate balance of the galaxy, but they fought. Malvar turned at last, his eyes meeting Thalolan's. "Open the channel," he said. "Broadcast on all frequencies, and pray they answer." Far below, in the depths of the spire, the first pulse of a distress signal flared to life, a beacon cast into the dark. For monsters, the distress signal burned through the void like a dying star's final scream. It pulsed across the black, a rhythmic cry of desperation encoded in every frequency the Malthari knew, and several they did not. It was a gamble, a blind throw into the abyss, but Thalolan had insisted. "The humans listen to everything," she had said, her voice edged with something between awe and fear. "Even the frequencies we consider silent." Malvar had not argued. There was no time. The signal arced past dead worlds and through nebulas, past the derelict hulks of Malthari outposts, already scoured clean by the enemy. It skimmed the edges of Cathari space, where listening posts registered its passage, but did nothing. The Veln, ever cautious, blocked its transmission through their relays. The Cathari let it pass, but only because they knew no one would answer. And then, impossibly, it was intercepted. Sol System, Mars Orbital Command, the alert blared through the steel, and ceramic halls of Olympus Station, a sharp, insistent klaxon that sent officers scrambling. Commander Diana Kim barely glanced up from her tactical display as the data streamed in, Anomalous signal, deep space origin, repeating pattern. Another one, Corporal Ryan Dixon muttered beside her, fingers dancing across his console. Third this week, probably just another pulsar echo. Diana didn't answer. Something about the signal's structure prickled at her instincts. It was too clean, too deliberate. Then the translation protocols kicked in. Her breath stilled. The message was simple. A plea, a name. She knew that name. Every officer in the Sol Defense Corps knew it. The Malthari were one of the few species that had never fired on a human vessel, never demanded tribute, never sneered at their primitive kinetics. They had watched, silent and curious, as humanity clawed its way into the stars, and now they were screaming for help. Diana's fingers tightened around the edge of her console. The Iron Admiral would want to see this. Aboard the Titan's Wrath, the Iron Admiral did not pace. He stood at the center of his command deck, motionless as a statue, his gaze locked on the holographic projection of the Malthari signal. Around him, his officers waited in silence. "They're being exterminated," Diana said quietly. The Cathari pulled support. The Veln closed their borders. The Sithari won't intervene. The Admiral's expression didn't change. And the enemy? Unknown. The Malthari didn't name them, but whatever's coming, it's enough to make the entire galactic neighborhood flee. A beat of silence. Then, prep the fleet. Diana blinked. "Sir." The Admiral turned, his eyes like flint. "You heard me, Commander. The Wrath leads, the Indomitable and Stormbreaker flank, full Marine complement." Dixon let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of firepower for a species we've never even traded with." The Admiral's voice didn't waver. "They asked for monsters, Corporal." A faint, grim smile touched Diana's lips. "Oh," she thought, "they have no idea what's coming." The Malthari homeworld hung in the void, like a dying ember, its once luminous auroras now flickering under the weight of an unseen storm. From orbit, the crystalline spires of their cities still shimmered, pale violet and silver, their flowing organic architecture untouched by war. Yet, Malvar, standing at the heart of the last functioning command nexus, felt the weight of that yet like a blade pressed against his throat. The enemy had not come with fire. They had come with silence. The first sign had been the drones, tiny, countless, a black tide seeping through the atmosphere like ink in water. They moved in perfect unison, a swarm with no mind, yet all the precision of one. Where they touched, Malthari technology changed. Bioluminescent panels dimmed, energy conduits pulsed erratically, then stilled. The great atmospheric condensers, designed to sing with the winds of their world, fell mute. And then the people began to vanish. Thalolan, his primary researcher, had been the first to understand. "They're not killing us," he had whispered, his voice hollow. "They're harvesting." Malvar had not believed him. Not until he saw the footage from the eastern spire, a Malthari child, frozen mid-scream as the swarm enveloped them, dissolving flesh and bone into nothingness in seconds. No blood, no wreckage, just absence. Now, standing before the last operational holodisplay, Malvar watched the swarms advance. Sector by sector, his world was being erased. "High Commander," Thalolan said softly. The final broadcast was sent. But there has been no response. Malvar closed his eyes. Of course there hadn't been. The Cathari had abandoned them. The Veln had sealed their borders. The Sithari had deemed them not worth the cost. And now, the Malthari would die alone. The holodisplay flickered. A new signal, sharp and unfamiliar, sliced through the static. Malvar's breath caught. A vessel. No vessels. 3 of them. Massive. Angular. Their hulls a brutalist contrast to the Maltharis flowing designs. They moved with terrifying purpose, cutting through the void like knives. And then the transmission came. A human voice. Rough, unpolished, utterly alien. Malthari command. This is Commander Diana Kim of the UEF's Wrath. We received your call. Malvar's hands trembled. We're here to help. Thalolan made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. They came. Malvar could only stare as the human ships took position. The swarm reacted. It recoiled, twisted. For the first time since its arrival, it hesitated. Malvar didn't understand. Not until the human vessels unleashed their payload. Not energy weapons, not plasma, kinetic rods, tungsten spears the size of skyscrapers, hurled at relativistic speeds. They struck the swarm's densest clusters, and where they hit, the black tide shattered. The drones, so finely tuned to consume organic matter and delicate energy flows, had no defense against sheer brute force. They crumpled, scattered, died in screaming silence. The human dropships descended. Malvar watched, stunned, as armored figures poured from their bellies. Not drones, not machines. Thalolan whispered, "They're fighting for us." Malvar exhaled. No, he realized. They're fighting because it's what they do. And for the first time since the swarm arrived, something like hope flickered in his chest. The Malthari command spire trembled as the kinetic rod struck home. Malvar's crystalline display fractured with static, the air itself vibrating from the distant impacts. The swarm's perfect cohesion, its seamless, predatory unity, was breaking, not from precision, not from superior technology, from force. The humans had not come with elegant solutions. They had not matched the swarm's sophistication. They had simply hit it, with the kind of raw, uncomplicated violence that made the universe flinch. Thalolan's bioluminescent markings pulsed erratically, his slender fingers tracing the devastation on the holoscreen. "They're disrupting the swarm's resonance field," he murmured, voice thin with disbelief. "The rods aren't just destroying drones. They're destabilizing the entire network." Malvar understood then. The swarm was a single entity, a distributed mind woven through quantum entanglement. It had no central node, no weak point to target, only endless, self-repairing multiplicity. But the humans had not tried to outthink it. They had shattered it. Above the planet, the human warships moved with brutal efficiency. Their hulls were blocky, angular things, forged from dark alloys that drank in the light. No flowing organic curves, no luminous energy channels. Just armor, just guns. And now the rods. Each projectile was a monument to human pragmatism. Tungsten alloy, dense and unyielding, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. No guidance systems, no elegant failsafes. Just mass, just velocity. Where they struck, the swarm buckled. Drones disintegrated in blooms of shattered metal, their delicate nanite structures unable to withstand the sheer kinetic transfer. The impact sent shockwaves through the swarm's cohesion, disrupting its synchronized movements for the first time. It faltered. On the surface, the Malthari defenders watched in stunned silence as the human dropships descended through the ash-choked sky. The vessels were ungainly roaring things, their engines belching heat and noise as they carved through the atmosphere. No anti-grav, no silent glide, just thrust, just fire. The ramps dropped. Armored figures emerged, their forms encased in matte, black exosuits, their visors glowing a dull predatory red. They moved with purpose, not the fluid grace of the Malthari, but the relentless, ground-eating stride of predators who knew only forward. Corporal Ryan Dixon was among them, his HUD flickered with targeting data, his rifle already tracking the nearest swarm tendril. No hesitation, no fear, just the mission: clear the LZ, secure the civies, kill the swarm. Behind him, Commander Diana Kim stepped onto the ravaged soil of a world not her own. Her gaze swept the horizon, taking in the shattered Malthari spires, the drifting ash, the writhing black tide that had brought an entire species to its knees. Her lips curled. "All right, bugs," she muttered. "Let's see how you like real war." Malvar felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't just relief, it was awe. The humans had not come with mercy. They had not come with diplomacy. They had come with rods and rifles and the unshakable certainty that some problems only had one solution. And as the swarm recoiled, as the first human artillery batteries on the surface began their thunderous chorus, he realized something vital. The galaxy had forgotten what war was. The humans had not. And today, the rods would sing. The sky burned. Malvar had never seen anything like it. The Malthari had waged war with elegance, precision strikes of ionized plasma, surgical nanite swarms, the cold calculus of energy signatures and shield harmonics. Their battles had been clean. This was not clean. This was fire and thunder, and the raw, shuddering force of mass accelerated to obscene velocities. The human artillery positions, clustered in the ruins of what had once been a Malthari atmospheric condenser, were vomiting destruction into the sky. Each kinetic rod launch sent a shockwave through the ground, a seismic growl that rattled Malvar's crystalline bones. The projectiles themselves were invisible until impact, but their aftermath was unmistakable. Distant blooms of fire, the swarm's writhing tendrils sheared apart by hypersonic fury. Malvar's secondary eyelids flickered shut against the glare. His people had once believed themselves masters of war. Now, watching the humans work, he understood the truth. The Malthari had waged conflict. The humans waged annihilation. Corporal Ryan Dixon didn't think. He moved. The swarm had learned. It had adapted. No longer mindlessly surging forward, it now coiled and struck like a living thing, tendrils lashing from cover, from beneath the rubble, from the corpses of fallen Malthari soldiers. It was faster now, smarter. Dixon didn't care. His rifle barked, tungsten rounds shredding through chitinous black flesh. Beside him, a Marine went down, her leg sheared off at the knee by a razor-edged tendril. Dixon didn't pause. He put 2 rounds into her attacker, then dragged her behind a shattered crystalline column. "Stay sharp, stay alive," he growled, slapping a tourniquet onto the stump. The Marine gritted her teeth, nodded. No time for more. The swarm was coming. Dixon turned, raised his rifle, and kept killing. Commander Diana Kim stood atop a broken spire, her boots grinding against the fractured purple, white alloy. Below her, the battle raged. Human fire teams advancing in disciplined wedges, the swarm recoiling, reforming, striking back. It wasn't enough. She keyed her comm. All batteries, switch to incendiary payloads, burn them out. A moment later, the sky turned to hell. Thermite rods streaked down, igniting the swarm's biomass in towering pillars of white. Hot flame, the creatures screamed, a sound like grinding metal, like a planet's crust splitting apart. Kim watched, unmoved. The Malthari had fought with grace. Humans fought with fire. Thalolan, the Malthari scientist, had hidden when the swarm first came. He had watched his people die, their elegant technology reduced to slag, their bodies dissolved into the black tide. He had believed it was the end. Now, he stood in the shadow of a human dropship, his delicate fingers trembling as he adjusted his scanner. The readings were impossible. The swarm's biomass was adapting, shifting its cellular structure in real time, hardening against kinetics, dispersing heat from incendiaries. It was learning, and the humans, Thalolan's breath caught as he saw it. A single Marine separated from his squad, surrounded, the swarm closed in, a living wall of razors and hunger. The Marine didn't run, he laughed. Then he pulled the pin on his grenade. Malvar felt the detonation through the ground. He turned, saw the fireball, saw the swarm recoil, not in pain, but in something else. For the first time in centuries, the Malthari commander understood what it meant to face an enemy that did not break. The humans had not come to save them. They had come to win, and as the rods continued to fall, Malvar knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would remember this day. Section Fae, the Bait Fleet, the Malthari Command, Spire shuddered as another kinetic rod struck the planet's surface, the impact sending tremors through its aerogel, reinforced bones. Malvar steadied himself against the crystalline observation rail, his bioluminescent veins pulsing with the rhythm of distant artillery. The sky burned, not with the clean, controlled auroras of Malthari energy shields, but with the crude, violent fires of human weaponry. He had expected desperation. He had not expected this. Thalolan's voice crackled through the command channel, distorted by atmospheric ionization. "Commander, the swarm's biomass is rerouting. It's prioritizing thermal resistance. The incendiary strikes are losing efficacy." Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, a reflexive gesture of distress. The swarm had never adapted this quickly before. It had always been methodical, patient, like the tide eroding a cliff. But the humans had changed the equation. They fought like a storm, unpredictable and relentless, and the swarm was learning from them. On the tactical display, the human fleet hung in high orbit, a jagged constellation of steel and fury. Their ships were blocky, inelegant things, devoid of the flowing organic curves that defined Malthari architecture. Yet, there was a brutal logic to their design. Every angle reinforced, every surface armored, every weapon system redundantly layered. They had built their vessels not for beauty, but for survival. And now they were dying. Malvar's crest flared as he watched the feed from the forward scouts. The human vanguard, designated bait fleet by their own commanders, was engaging the swarm's orbital tendrils. Their destroyers weaved through the void, railguns firing salvos of tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds, each impact shearing through biomass with grotesque efficiency. But the swarm was vast, and for every tendril severed, 3 more lashed out in retaliation. A Malthari scout, ship's distress signal flickered across the display, then vanished, swallowed by the purple, white surge of a bioplasmic strike. "They're sacrificing themselves," Thalolan whispered, his voice hollow. Malvar said nothing. He had seen the human transmissions, heard the chatter between their warships. The bait fleet knew its role. It was not meant to survive. It was meant to distract, and in the darkness beyond the battle, something else moved. Commander Diana Kim exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. The Okinawa's bridge was silent save for the steady ping of targeting systems and the occasional shudder of near-miss impacts. On the main display, the bait fleet's icons winked out one by one. She had known their names. She had chosen them. Corporal Ryan Dixon shifted beside her, his grip tightening on the tactical console. "Ma'am, swarm's biomass is concentrating around the engagement zone. Penetration estimates at Faye." Kim didn't flinch. "Signal the Thunderchild Squadron. Tell them to light the fuse." Dixon's grin was a blade in the dark. "With pleasure." The Lowland scanner screamed a warning an instant before the sky split open. A new energy signature flared on the edge of the system. Human, but unlike anything the Malthari had recorded. 6 vessels, each larger than a battlecruiser, their hulls studded with bulbous protrusions that pulsed with a deep, malevolent red. The swarm reacted instantly, tendrils recoiling from the bait fleet and surging toward the newcomers. Then the humans fired. The weapons didn't burn. They didn't cut. They unmade. Beams of crimson energy lanced out, and where they struck, the swarm's biomass didn't just die. It disintegrated, molecular bonds unraveling in cascading failure. The Lowland's instruments overloaded, his screen flooding with catastrophic biological collapse readings. What are those?" A Malthari technician stammered. Malvar watched, his veins dimming with something akin to awe. The humans had not brought mere weapons to this fight. They had brought vengeance. Thalolan's fingers trembled over his console as the human weapons carved through the swarm like a blade through water. The crimson beams didn't just kill. They erased entire tendrils of the enemy dissolved into clouds of inert dust, their cohesion shattered at the molecular level. The Malthari had weapons that burned, that tore, that poisoned, but nothing like this. Nothing that unmade life itself with such clinical, terrifying efficiency. Malvar stood frozen at the command, dais, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically. The humans had not come to fight. They had come to scour. The 6 human vessels, designated Revenant, classed by their transponders, moved with eerie synchronicity, their bulbous weapon arrays rotating in perfect unison. Each crimson lance carved a path of annihilation, the swarm recoiling as if sensing a predator it could not comprehend. The lowlands instruments screamed with overload warnings, their delicate crystalline matrices struggling to process the sheer scale of destruction. Then, the humans did something worse. A new signal pulsed from the lead vessel, a single shuddering transmission that bypassed all encryption, all protocol. It wasn't a request, it wasn't a warning, it was a command. Malthari forces, withdraw to defensive perimeter Sigma Phi. You are not equipped for what comes next. The voice was human, female, calm, utterly devoid of hesitation. Commander Diana Kim, Thalolan, had studied human vocal patterns. But this was different. This was the voice of someone who had already decided the fate of millions and did not waver. Malvar's crest flared in indignation. We are not some fledgling species to be ordered about. The swarm reacted before he could finish. A colossal mass of biomass, larger than any previously encountered, surged from the depths of the void. It was no longer attacking. It was fleeing, recoiling from the human vessels, in a desperate, writhing retreat. And the humans led it. For 3 heartbeats, the Revenant class ships held fire, their crimson arrays dimming. Thalolan's breath caught. Were they hesitating? Showing mercy? Then the lead vessel's hull split open. A cylindrical structure, black as the void between stars, slid forward from its armored womb. It was massive, easily the length of a Malthari frigate, and utterly featureless save for a single pulsing rune etched into its surface. Rod of God, armed. The words were flat, final. Thalolan's blood turned to ice. He had studied human warfare. He knew the term, kinetic bombardment. The cylinder detached. For a moment, it simply hung there, inert, a sliver of darkness against the stars. Then its propulsion ignited, not with the flare of plasma or the roar of chemical thrust, but with a soundless gravity, warping distortion that made Thalolan's inner ear revolt. The weapon accelerated. It crossed the distance to the swarm in less than a second, striking the heart of the biomass with the force of a dying star. There was no explosion, no fire, just space itself rippled, the shockwave propagating through the swarm in a wave of pure kinetic fury. Biomass vaporized, tendrils unraveled. The very fabric of the enemy's cohesion shattered, its once unstoppable advance reduced to drifting particulate. Thalolan's console died. The feedback had overloaded every sensor within 1,000 kilometers. Then, from the void, a single transmission, human, male, laced with something between exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Swarm neutralized. Malthari command, you are clear to regroup. Corporal Ryan Dixon. Thalolan recognized the voice from intercepted human combat logs. A soldier, just a soldier. Malvar's veins had gone dark. His mandibles worked soundlessly. The humans had not just won, they had rewritten the rules of war. The silence that followed the kinetic strike was not the absence of sound, but the absence of understanding. Thalolan's claws hovered over the dead console, the bioluminescent panels flickering weakly, as if struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. The Malthari had spent centuries refining their technology, elegant, flowing constructs of crystalline silver and aurora, bright energy designed to harmonize with the universe rather than dominate it. Their weapons had been precise, surgical, calibrated to minimize waste. And then the humans had arrived, and they had brought force. Not the delicate ionization of Malthari lances, not the controlled plasma arcs of their allies. No, the humans had reached into the void, plucked a fragment of a dead star, and hurled it at their enemy like a stone cast into a pond. Thololan's secondary heart pulsed erratically. His mind raced through the implications. The kinetic rod had not just destroyed the swarm, it had erased it. There was no debris, no residual energy signature, just a perfect sphere of nothingness where the enemy had been. Malvar stood motionless at the viewport, his carapace plates shifting in a subconscious ripple of distress. His mandibles flexed once, twice, as if trying to form words that did not exist in his language. The humans had not fought, they had ended. And now, from the wreckage of their own shattered understanding, the Malthari had to decide what came next. The transmission from the human vessel arrived, not as a request, but as a statement. Malthari Command, this is Commander Diana Kim of the Seoul Marine Corps. We are moving to assist your remaining fleet elements. Advise immediate regrouping at these coordinates. The voice was calm, unhurried, as if she had not just rewritten the laws of engagement in a single stroke. Thololan's claws twitched toward the console, hesitating. Protocol demanded he respond with the proper channels, the measured diplomacy of his people. But the humans did not operate on protocol. They operated on results. Malvar exhaled sharply, the sound a hiss of pressurized air through his vents. Open a direct channel. Thololan obeyed. The holographic projection shimmered into existence. Commander Kim. Her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp, scanning the Malthari command center with the detached efficiency of a predator assessing terrain. She wore no ceremonial garb, no flowing energy sigils to denote rank. Just a black and gray combat suit, its surface scuffed from use. Thololan had seen human commanders before. In intercepted transmissions, they always looked tired, as if the weight of their species' relentless expansion had settled into their bones. Kim was no exception, but there was something else in her gaze now. Something that made Thololan's secondary heart stutter. Recognition she knew. She knew exactly what the Malthari were realizing in this moment, that the galaxy had just changed. Corporal Ryan Dixon's voice crackled over the comms again, rougher this time, laced with static. We've got movement on the far side of the debris field. Could be stragglers, advise? Kim didn't hesitate. Engage at will. A pause, then, almost amused. Rod still hot. Commander. Kim's lips twitched. Then make it count. The transmission cut. Thololan's claws dug into the console. The humans spoke of destruction with the same ease as discussing weather patterns. Malvar turned slowly, his bioluminescent veins pulsing a deep, unsettled violet. They do not ask for permission. Thololan exhaled. No, they do not. And that, more than anything, was what terrified him, because the Malthari had spent their entire history seeking consensus. The humans, they simply acted, and the universe bent to their will. The debris field shimmered under the cold starlight, a graveyard of shattered Malthari vessels, drifting in slow, silent arcs. Their once gleaming hulls, carved from flowing silver alloys and veined with bioluminescent energy channels, now lay broken, twisted sculptures of defeat. Thololan watched them through the observation blister, his claws flexing against the smooth aerogel surface. This should not have happened. The Malthari consensus had calculated every variable. The enemy's nanite swarms, their adaptive shielding, their overwhelming numbers, all had been accounted for. The simulations had been flawless. A human warship, barely a third the size of a Malthari cruiser, had torn through them like a blade through mist. Thololan's secondary eyelids flickered shut for a moment, his mind replaying the battle in jagged fragments. The way the human vessel had moved, not with the elegant, flowing precision of Malthari drives, but with brutal mechanical certainty. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just thrust and fire and impact, as inevitable as gravity. Behind him, Malvar stood rigid, his bioluminescent veins pulsing an erratic violet. White, the commander, had not spoken since the last transmission from the human soldier, the one who had spoken of a hot rod with the same casual tone one might use to remark upon the weather. Thalolan understood now. The humans did not calculate like the Malthari. They did not weigh probabilities or seek consensus. They chose, and then they made the universe conform. Corporal Ryan Dixon exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet, for a fraction of a second before the suit's systems whisked it away. The targeting reticule in his HUD pulsed red, locked onto the last flicker of movement in the debris field. Stragglers, probably Malthari, maybe enemy scouts, didn't matter. His finger hovered over the trigger, the railgun's capacitor hummed in his grip, the weapon still thrumming with residual heat from its last shot. He could feel it through the armor's tactile feedback, a low, eager vibration, like a hound straining at the leash. Make it count, the commander's words echoed in his skull. He didn't smile, didn't hesitate, just fired. Thalolan flinched as the kinetic rod struck. It was not a graceful weapon, not like the Malthari's ion lances or the enemy's disassembler fields. It did not shimmer, did not flow. It was a spear of tungsten alloy, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, and when it hit, physics did the rest. The target, a crippled enemy frigate, simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way. One moment, it was there, its organic curves glowing faintly in the dark. The next, it was an expanding cloud of molten debris, the shock wave rippling outward in perfect concentric rings. No elegance, no artistry, just force, applied with surgical precision. Malvar's voice was barely audible over the ship's trembling sensors. They do not even see the beauty in destruction. Thalolan turned his face away from the observation blister. No, to them, it is not destruction. Then what? A means to an end. The words settled between them, heavy as a dying star. The humans did not revel in war. They did not craft it into poetry or ritual. They simply won, and that, Thalolan realized with dawning horror, was why they were unstoppable. Because to them, this was not a battle. It was arithmetic. The Malthari command spire trembled, not from weapons fire, not yet, but from the sheer psychic weight of the inevitable. The great crystalline arches, carved by stellar winds over millennia, hummed with a resonance that had nothing to do with their elegant atmospheric condensers. It was the sound of a civilization holding its breath. Malvar stood at the central observation platform, his silver-veined hands resting on the railing. Below him, the last of the Malthari fleet shimmered in the void, their flowing organic hulls pulsing with aurora hues, their weapon arrays glowing faintly like bioluminescent warnings. They were beautiful. They were doomed. The enemy did not care for beauty. Thalolan approached, his steps silent on the aerogel floor. His cranial filaments, usually a calm pale violet, flickered with erratic pulses of stress. "The final broadcast has been sent," he murmured. "All frequencies, all known languages, even the dead ones." Malvar did not turn. And the others? Of course. The Galactic Accord had abandoned them. The Malthari had been too peaceful, too trusting. Their flowing cities and wind-swept spires had no place in a universe that rewarded only the ruthless. A soft chime echoed through the spire. Thalolan's breath hitched. Something answered. Malvar finally turned. Who? Thalolan's voice was barely a whisper. Unknown origin the signal was. Crude, pulsed in tight. Beam bursts. No artistry, no harmonics. Malvar's throat tightened. There was only one species that communicated like that. Elsewhere, in the dark, the human vessel Silentium was not beautiful. It was a block of reinforced alloys, angular and brutal, its surface pockmarked from impacts and radiation scarring. No flowing energy currents adorned its hull. No delicate crystalline arrays, just armor, thick, layered, and utterly unapologetic. Inside, Commander Diana Kim watched the Malthari distress signal replay for the third time. The alien's voice had been translated, soft, melodic, a plea wrapped in resignation. We are the last. If any hear this, we ask for nothing but witness. Corporal Ryan Dixon exhaled sharply. They're getting slaughtered. Kim didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the tactical display. The Malthari fleet was outnumbered 12-1. Their attackers, the Vorath, were methodical, efficient. They didn't just destroy, they erased. Dixon shifted. Common's orders. Kim's fingers tapped once on the console. We're outside Accord jurisdiction. A pause, then. Fuck jurisdiction. Kim almost smiled. Almost the Silentium's engines flared to life. Back in the spire, the Lowland gasped. A new signature had appeared on the scanners, and moving fast, Malvar's spine stiffened. What is that? The Lowland's hands trembled as he adjusted the sensors. It's a single ship, human design. Malvar's breath left him. The humans. The ones who had never answered any call before. The ones who fought like gravity itself, relentless, inevitable. The Lowland's voice cracked. They're not stopping. And they weren't. The Silentium shot past the Malthari lines without slowing, its engines burning white. It didn't hail the Vorath, didn't demand surrender. It simply arrived. The first kinetic rod struck. The Vorath command ship rippled, its organic hull buckling like crushed foil. There was no fire, no slow motion detonation. Just physics, applied with brutal simplicity. Malvar's claws dug into the railing. They came. The Lowland whispered the rest. And in that moment, the Malthari learned something terrible and wonderful. Humans did not fight for glory. They fought for silent things like mercy, like justice, like the unbreakable weight of a promise heard across the dark. The void between stars had never felt so small. Malvar watched the Silentium carve through the Vorath fleet, like a blade through water, its hull gleaming under the reflected light of dying ships. The humans had not come with fanfare. No grand speeches, no demands of tribute, just a single vessel moving with the quiet inevitability of a falling stone. The Vorath scrambled, their organic warships, sleek predatory things of flowing violet alloys and bioluminescent veins, twisted in space, trying to regroup. Their weapons flared, streams of ionized plasma lashing toward the human ship. The Silentium didn't dodge. It didn't need to. The plasma splashed against its armor and dissipated like rain on stone. Malvar's breath caught. The Malthari had spent centuries refining their defenses, layering energy, dispersing fields and crystalline shielding. Yet here was a human ship, shrugging off fire that would have melted a Malthari dreadnought to slag. Then the second rod struck. A Vorath cruiser, one of their heaviest, its hull woven with living armor, simply folded. The kinetic impact didn't just pierce, it unmade. The ship crumpled inward, its structure collapsing like a crushed insect. No explosion, just silence, and then the slow, terrible drift of wreckage. The Lowland's voice was barely audible. They don't even hesitate. Malvar understood now. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had not come to intimidate. They had come to end this. On the bridge of the Silentium, Commander Diana Kim watched the tactical feed with cold precision. The Vorath were regrouping, their remaining ships clustering around their command vessel, a massive pulsating construct of organic tech, its surface alive with swirling auroras of purple, white energy. Corporal Ryan Dixon exhaled through his teeth. They're trying to shield the big one. Diana didn't answer. Her fingers hovered over the firing console. One rod left. The Vorath command ship was the heart of their fleet. Kill it, and the rest would scatter. But it was also the most heavily shielded, its defenses woven from the same flowing, adaptive alloys that made their tech so deadly. Dixon glanced at her. We could swing around, hit from the other side. No, Diana's voice was quiet. They'll adjust. We don't have time. She knew what she had to do. The Silentium's engines flared, and the ship lunged forward, not evading, not retreating, but charging straight at the command ship. Alarms blared. The Vorath weapons locked on, Dixon's hands clenched. Mom, the last rod launched. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the Vorath command ship shuddered. Its shields flared. The auroras twisting violently as they tried to disperse the impact. But kinetic rods didn't care about energy dispersion. They didn't care about adaptive armor. They cared about mass and velocity and the unforgiving laws of motion. The rod punched through. The command ship split, its hull peeling open like rotten fruit. Purple, white energy geysered into the void, the ship's core detonating in a silent, radiant burst. Malvar's claws dug into the railing. The Vorath fleet moments ago, a coiled, unstoppable force, froze. Then, like a pack of animals realizing their alpha was dead, they broke. Ships wheeled, their formations dissolving into chaos. Some fled, others, leaderless, drifted aimlessly. Thalolan whispered, "It's over." Malvar didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the silentium, its hull now scarred but unbroken. The humans had not come for glory. They had come for this. And in the wreckage of the Vorath fleet, the Malthari finally understood. When humanity fought, they did not leave questions, only answers. The wreckage of the Vorath command ship drifted in slow, molten spirals, its once pristine organic curves now twisted into grotesque shapes. The purple-white energy that had once pulsed through its veins bled into the void, dissipating like the last breath of a dying star. Malvar stood motionless on the observation deck of the silentium, his claws still embedded in the railing. The shock of the battle had not yet left him. His mind, trained for centuries in the art of war, struggled to reconcile what had just happened. The humans had not merely won, they had rewritten the rules. Across the battlefield, the remnants of the Vorath fleet scattered like leaves in a storm. Some ships burned, their hulls cracked open by kinetic fury. Others fled, their commanders too stunned to issue coherent orders. The Malthari had seen the Vorath break before, but never like this. Never in terror, Thalolan approached, his bioluminescent markings flickering with exhaustion. "They're gone," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. "Not just retreating, broken." Malvar exhaled, his breath fogging the crystalline viewport. They thought they were invincible. A silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. The Vorath had believed themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. They had crushed civilizations, dissolved alliances, and ruled through fear. And then humanity had arrived, not with superior technology, not with grand speeches or diplomatic maneuvering, with rods of tungsten and the unshakable certainty of physics. On the bridge of the silentium, Commander Diana Kim watched the tactical display with quiet satisfaction. The Vorath fleet was in full rout, their formations shattered beyond recovery. Beside her, Corporal Ryan Dixon let out a low whistle. "Damn," he muttered. "Guess they weren't ready for the good old fuck you from Newton's first law." Kim didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed. They never are. The Malthari crew around them exchanged glances. Some still flinched at the humans' casual irreverence. Others, slowly, cautiously, began to understand. This was not recklessness. This was confidence. Thalolan found himself drawn to the human vessel, its blocky, angular form, a stark contrast to the flowing elegance of Malthari design. He had studied their history, their wars, their stubborn refusal to bow to greater powers. But he had never truly understood them. Not until now. Humans did not fight for dominance. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for each other. And when they chose to stand beside another species, they did not do so with half measures. They brought everything. The Vorath would not return. That much was certain. But the galaxy was vast, and other predators lurked in the dark. Malvar turned from the viewport, his mind already racing. The Malthari had survived this day, not by their own strength, but by the will of a species they had once dismissed as primitive, a species that had looked upon their plight and answered with a single, unshakable truth: no one burns our allies. Far beyond the battlefield, in the depths of uncharted space, the echoes of the battle rippled outward. Sensors flickered, messages were intercepted, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy listened. Because humanity had not just won a battle. They had sent a message, and the universe, at last, was paying attention.